Lab1. Microsoft SQL Server 2019 Installation and Configuration. I will guide you through the steps to install Microsoft SQL Server 2019. To begin the installation process, we must first locate the C drive builds folder where the installer downloaded in our lab exercise. Once you have located the folder, you will need to double-click on the file named SQL Server 2019-x64-enu.iso. It will mount the ISO image as a virtual drive. From here, we will click on the setup.exe file to start the installation process. After clicking, we will be presented with a series of options. We will select the Installation option from the left panel. This will take us to the installation menu, and we should choose the options New Server Standalone Installation or Add Features to an existing installation. In the Product Key screen, there are different options available for free edition. Evaluation. This option is free to use for a limited period and provides us with all the features and capabilities of the Enterprise Edition. Developer. This option is free for development and testing, but it is not suitable for production environment. Express. This option is also free and is a lightweight version of SQL Server that has limited features and capabilities. Please note that Documentum Server did not support this option. For a production environment, we must enter a valid product key. The product key is a 25-character alphanumeric code that is case-sensitive. Therefore, for our training purposes, we will select the evaluation option as our free edition. Once we have made our selection, we can click on the Next button to continue the installation process. In the License Terms screen, we are presented with the terms and conditions of using SQL Server 2019. It is essential that we read through these terms and conditions carefully to ensure that we understand our rights and responsibilities as users of this software. Once we have thoroughly read through the license terms, we must check the box next to I accept the license terms and privacy statement to signify that we agree to the terms and conditions set forth by Microsoft. By doing so, we are acknowledging that we will abide by the terms and conditions outlined in the license terms. It is important to note that failure to accept the license terms will prevent us from proceeding with the installation. After that, we click on Next button to go to the next step. In the Microsoft Update screen, it is recommended that you check the box beside the option Use Microsoft Update to check for updates. This option will allow your database system to stay up to date with the latest security patches, bug fixes, and other important updates that Microsoft releases. Once you have checked this option, simply click on the Next button to go for next step. By doing so, you can ensure that your SQL Server installation is always up to date and running at its best. The installer will identify any potential problems that might occur during the installation and display the results on the Install Rules screen. We must carefully review the results and fix any items marked as failed, as well as pay close attention to any items marked as warnings. Due to training purpose, we have disabled the Windows firewall, which caused a warning to appear on the Install Rules screen. However, in a production environment, it is important to turn on the firewall and assign the corresponding firewall rules to the ports required. Once we have reviewed and fixed the listed issues, we can proceed to the next steps of the installation process by clicking on the Next button. Features Selections. When installing SQL Server 2019 to support Documentum Server, it is required to select the following features: Database Engine Services, Client Tool Connectivity, Client Tool Backward Compatibility, and Client Tool SDK. It is important to note that if we install the Documentum Server separately, we will also need to install those components in Content Server, without the database engine services. Once we have selected the necessary features, we can proceed to the next step of the installation process by clicking on the Next button. Instance configuration. In this screen, we will be setting up the instance ID for SQL Server. The instance ID is a unique identifier that is used to differentiate between multiple instances of SQL Server that may be running on the same physical server. It is used to create a unique service name for the SQL Server instance, which is used by the Windows Service Control Manager to start and stop the instance. Additionally, it is used to name the default directories and paths where the SQL Server system and user databases are stored for each instance. It also helps to identify the instance when connecting to it from a client application or tool. For the training purpose, we will select the default instance and then click on Next button to proceed the following step. Server configuration. The key aspects of this screen is to specify the service account and collation. When configuring the service account, it is recommended to leave the setting as default for training purposes. However, it is essential to customize the collation to ensure that it is compatible with the Documentum server. To do this, we need to click on the collation tab on the screen and then click on the Customize button. This action will open a pop-up window that allows us to select the collation we want to use. It is highly recommended to select the SQL Lab1 General CP 850 CSAS collation, which is designed for dictionary order, case-sensitive, for use with the 850 multilingual character set. Once we have selected the collation, we need to click on the OK button to close the pop-up screen. Finally, we need to click on the Next button. This will take us to the next screen. Database engine configuration. In this screen, we have several configurations to choose from, including server configuration, data directories, tempdb, max degree of parallelism, memory, and file stream. For the purpose of this training, we will only configure the server configuration and leave the other settings as default. To begin, we need to select Mixed Mode for authentication. This allows us to use both Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. After selecting this option, we will be prompted to enter a password for the SA account and confirm the password. Next, we will add the current user for SQL Server administration, so that we can use the current user to log in the database as administrator. Once we have added the user, we can click Next button to proceed to the next screen. Ready to install. We are now at the final step of our MS SQL Server 2019 installation process. We can review the settings we have configured in the previous screens. If we need to make any changes, we can click on the Back button to go back to the corresponding screen and modify the settings. If everything looks good and we are ready to proceed with the installation, we can click on the Install button. The installation process will take approximately 5 minutes to complete, depending on the speed of your computer. During the installation process, it is important to ensure that we do not interrupt or stop the installation. Doing so can cause errors or corrupt the database system. Once the installation process is complete, we will see a message indicating that the installation was successful. At this point, we can click on the Close button to quit the installer. SQL Server Management Studio installation. SQL Server Management Studio. This tool is a powerful application that allows us to manage and administer our SQL Server databases. To begin the installation process, we need to locate the Builds folder at C drive. Once we have located this folder, we can double-click on the file ssms-setup-enu.exe to start the installation. After we have started the installation process, we will be prompted to review the installation path. This is where SQL Server Management Studio will be installed on the computer. If we need to change the installation path, we can do so by clicking on the Change button. Once we have reviewed the installation path, we can proceed with the installation by clicking on the Install button. The installation process will take around 6 minutes to complete, depending on the speed of the computer. Once the installation process is complete, we will see a message indicating that the installation was successful. At this point, we can click on the Close button to quit the installer. Launch the SQL Server Management Studio. First, click on the Start menu on the computer. Next, locate the SQL Server Management Studio option from the list of programs and click on it. Once the SQL Server Management Studio is launched, you will see the Connect to Server window. Here, enter the server name as Train01, which is the server that have been installed for this lab exercise. Next, select the authentication type as SQL Server Authentication. In the Login field, enter SA. Enter the password associated with the SA login in the password field. Finally, click on the Connect button to establish a connection to the SQL Server. Create database user. Firstly, in the Object Explorer pane, expand the server node, which will be Train01 for this lab setup. The node will show its databases and security-related items. After that, expand the security folder to reveal the login folder, which represents all users that can connect to the server. Finally, right-click on the login folder and select New Login from the context menu. This will open the New Login dialog box. In this course, we will be creating a Documentum repository named Train in our upcoming lab, and we'll need to create a user named Train to act as the repository owner. Here's how you can enter the necessary user information. In the General tab of the New Login dialog box, enter Train as the login name. Then select SQL Server Authentication. Enter the password for the user, and then confirm it by retyping it. Uncheck the Enforce Password Policy option to avoid having to follow specific password requirements. Once you have entered all of the necessary user information, click the OK button to create the user. Create Repository Database. In the Object Explorer pane, locate the Databases folder and then right-click on it. From the context menu that appears, select New Database to open the New Database dialog box. In the General tab of the dialog box, enter the name DM_train_docbase as the database name. This is the recommended naming convention for the repository Train. Then, click the Browse button next to the Owner field. Enter Train as the object name on the Select Database Owner dialog and click the Check Name button to make sure the user exists in the database. Click OK to close the pop-up window. Under the Database Files section, you can set the initial size for both the rows data and log file types. For this lab exercise, enter 1024. You can adjust this value based on your specific needs. Now, click on the Options tab to configure some additional settings. In the Collation drop-down menu, select SQL Latin 1 General CP 850 CSAS. Then modify the other options with the following entries. Change Auto Create Statistics value to false. Change Auto Update Statistics asynchronously value to true. Scroll down to Max Degree of Parallelism and change the value to 1. Locate the entry of Allow Snapshot Isolation, change the value to true. Navigate to the entry Is Read Committed Snapshot On and change the value also to true. Finally, Scroll down to Parameterization Entry and modify the value to Forced. Once you've entered all the necessary database information and configured the options, click the OK button to create the database.